How many times do we have to be present at the death of good men, of whatever belief, like in Congo, and ask ourselves why things in that country go on like this? It seems there are no solutions because there are other problems. How many times we should cry for that half a million people, 12 million refugees, of whom the half is out of Syria, and 100,000 people let disappear by force from Syria. How many times we would see scrolling decades and decades to see that in so many parts of the world nothing changed. A third world war piece by piece, which breaks our heart. Today, not tomorrow. We know that the proper time that the virus is telling us we have broken the harmony between man and creation, and that we have to change course because otherwise it will be the end of humankind. This evening, we want to do another step towards the awareness of these other powers which remain and which provoke damages to human being and all creation. Before giving the floor to our important guests, friends, and witnesses, let's try to have in our heart in this moment of faith a specific faith. Each of you should think about somebody, probably the migrant close to you, or images seen on TV, or a victim of the COVID, or a teenager whose parents can't succeed in supporting him, a victim of the slavery of consumerism, or an adult slave of the temptation of the impotence and who believes that things can change. Each of us has a face now with him, but let us take 2 minutes before starting our meeting that the beauty reaps the nightmare. Let the music come in the gash we have in our heart.
Buonasera a tutti, eccoci a questo nostro incontro degli animatori Laudato Si, aperto a tutte le persone interessate dal titolo
Good evening, everybody. The animators open to all people interested,
Conflitto,
entitled Fossil Fuels and Economic Powers, not to plundering and conflict, yes to co-responsibility inside the human family. The anniversary of the war in Syria calls on all of us to reject a culture of indifference and bear witness to the suffering of our brothers and sisters at the hands of special interests seeking short-term economic or political gain. Pope Francis reminds it us in the encyclical Fratelli Tutti. Such care does not interest those economic powers that demand quick profits.
politica e la natura distruttiva delle
The
sorti
fossil fuel industry, its economic power,
persone di
its
conflitto,
political influence, and the destructive nature of its activities has led to a frequent connection between the fossil fuels extraction, the human suffering, the destruction of creation, and the conflict.
uno dei
To
principi
end the priority of the short-term conflict and the combat, the care of creation, including the dignity and the wellness of our brothers and sisters, is one of the key principles of Pope Francis' message both in Laudato Si and Fratelli Tutti. For this reason, we wanted to choose this theme and speaking about it among us
e guadagni di breve termine,
to raise the awareness about the cry of creation, the poor, before this preeminence of the logic of the short-term profit, including the ongoing proliferation of the fossil fuels at a global level. In this meeting, we listened to some witnesses, as the case of Syria, Libya with Nello Scavo, who meanwhile is reaching us, I hope, of all the Eastern Mediterranean area. The interests of a few had led to suffering for a lot, including the role played by the fossil fuels in war and weapon traffic. We listened to witnesses from Uganda and Mozambique, where firms, a lot of which have had offices in Europe, in Italy too, are trying to expand the extraction and transportation of fossil fuels for the profits, posing at serious risk the local people, the entire family, and our common home. We come from the Synod for Amazonia. We have heard the cry of the Synod of Amazonia, but Amazonia is in different parts of the world. So I soon give the floor and I thank all our guests here with us and all of you who are with us today. I soon give the floor to Riccardo Cristiano. Riccardo is a friend,
è un grande
a
conoscitore
family friend, a Vaticanist, and before a reporter in the Middle East.
del confine tra la Siria e l'Iraq,
He knows very well the conflict in Syria,
che ha documentato
and he will lead us to know all the things about the Iraq. And I also invite him to comment the next trip of the Pope in Iraq. He has just published a great book, Bergoglio Barbarie, Francesco in front of the global disorder. Thank you, Riccardo. You have 8, 10 minutes. At the 8th minute, I'll make you a sign. Thank you very much to be here. Yes, good evening. I will try to stay in time, but I think that thank you, it's my duty, above all because this meeting helps us to connect two important events. One, according to a chronology, reminds us that in Syria 10 years ago, a new, a new phase of conflict was starting. A phase pacific before by the protesters and then violent or more violent with the involvement of all the great global actors. And then uh, in a few days, it starts a trip, an extraordinary trip of Pope Francis in Iraq. Uh, This trip, I would define it extraordinary, not only because for the first time a pope goes to Abraham's hometown, to Europe, not only because for the first time a pope goes for an interview with the great Ayatollah al-Sistani in the holy city of the Shiites, Najaf, not only because for the first time a pope brings a word of peace and brotherhood in a place which has been the capital of ISIS, Mosul, where Shiite and Christians have been driven away in the most beautiful terms could be imagined from the militia of the self-structured ISIS. Not only because for the first time he will go to the plain of Nineveh in Krakow and other centers of Badi, but because he will do this, all this in the name of a motto taken from the Gospel of Matthew, you are all brothers. So this is the exceptionality, in my opinion, more of all the all mentioned data. And to explain this exceptionality, which connects the trip to Iraq to Syrian tragedy, in the nightmare of Libya, where it has been denounced aloud, and all the wounds that are connected one another. To understand how they are connected and this trip means, I think that with the help of a map, if we can see it, with this map, we could understand where Pope Francis goes. This is a simple map of Eurasia area extended to a part of Africa. And we see that if we link Tehran, the Iranian capital, with Palermo, the center of the Mediterranean, and in the other part we link Moscow, the Russian capital, with the Strait of Hormuz to the passing point of passage from the Persian Gulf to the warm seas, we have a sort of cross whose point of intersection is the Iraq. And this lets us understand better the different maps that now using this one I will illustrate you, because not only from an energetic point of view, not only from a spiritual point of view, but from both the points of view and also from a political, cultural point of view, this trip places itself at the heart of the conflict of staying or exiting from the catastrophe, Mediterranean catastrophe, and getting into a Mediterranean of peace. Iran, which you can see in light blue, is basically a big plateau. Getting to this plain in Iraq, the ancient Mesopotamia, which from the times of Alexander the Great has been defined, considered the door of the Mediterranean space, and that's it. So if we overlap different readings, we see that Abraham's path, starting from Ur near Baghdad, near the intersection of the two lines, brings him through Syria, Turkey, Jordan, up to the city where he died, Hebron, 2 steps away from the Mediterranean. And this path unifying the three peoples descending from Abraham, Jews, Christians, and Muslims, in only one people, the Abrahamic one, is the spiritual path of peace, the Mediterranean peace, but it is also the strategic path of a peace which can't disregard these stages. Why? Because this path, the path of Abraham, is very similar of the one of the pipeline which we always refer to explain the conflicts taking place, also the one in Syria. The so-called Islamic pipeline, starting from the south of Iran, crossing Iraq, Syria, and Libya, and getting to Europe, which is the so-called Qatar pipeline, because it starts from the Qatar, a piece entering in the Gulf of the right of Saudi Arabia, and crosses the Saudi territory, the border with Iraq, Syria, and then it comes towards the European coasts. These two pipelines would be, for certain storytelling, the causes of lots of conflicts, but surely also the access to the warm seas from the Russia, which aims at having some influence on such a famous warm seas near Hormuz. This has its importance. And why not considering the weight of Turkey, considering itself heir of the Ottoman Empire, which was arriving as a next interpreter of the Byzantine Empire right until the borders with Iran, incorporating also Iran. So, in this point, in, in this which has been called the strategic node, the bottleneck which links Asia and Europe, we have an overlap of richness screeching fiercely with poverties. Wealth are in the subsoil underground. Poverties are above this soil. If we see in Iraq, we have more than the 50% of official unemployment. If we give a look to the banking system, it's collapsing in Iraq as it has collapsed in Syria and like it's collapsing in Lebanon. But the history leads us to do math also with some differences. You would remember in 2003, where there has been the American invasion of Iraq, that the famous agreement for the sharing of the resources, the agreement was proposed by the United States of America to the authorities in Iraq to take the contract of the oil wells. It was practically condemned as a form of imperialism by the whole pacifist world and the Western above all. But the similar agreement signed in these last days in Damascus between the Damascene authorities and the Russian for the PSA, the exploitation. PSA is product sharing agreement, didn't generate similar protests, but yet the Russian intervention, together with the Iranian intervention, has determined during this 10-year conflict what? The permanence of the power of the man guaranteeing the Iranian and Russian interests, Bashar al-Assad. It guarantees them not because it looks favorably a lovely relation with Russia and Iraq. It guarantees them because it believes that the Russian intervention and the Iranian military one could have guaranteed its survival against the interest of the Syrian people, who didn't want to make use any more of this cooperation. To explain this, it will be enough to remember that in Europe, in Koblenz, in the past hour, a court has considered the two defendants escaping from Syria, but others have been identified and denounced as torturers, guilty of crimes against humanity. And the crimes against humanity perpetrated by the system they belonged to, and the former ambassador of Obama's administration for the human rights in the world, Stephen Rapp, commenting this judgment, said that today in the world there are more documents at disposal about the crimes committed by the regime of Assad against the human king respect to the one at disposal during the time of the Nuremberg trial against the Nazi hierarchs. So I end in a few seconds saying that the Pope's trip is a trip to remind us that Fratelli Tutti means to bring Abraham's message in his spiritual path and in our political path, in the rebuilding of the map of the Mediterranean, which is a map of brotherhood and not of hate. Thank you.
fare questi troppo lunghi
Thank you
e
so much.
spunti.
For me to give you the time, but they say that this meeting should not be long. It's difficult, but really a lot of hints to have in the future also for initiative to go in depth.
3 secondi.
Thank you so much. This wealth underground and this poverty coming out and this Mediterranean of peace. I won't steal other seconds to our guests, and I soon give the floor to Nello Scavo. With Nello, we do not know personally, uh, but it is known for his inquiries on Avvenire, on television. We know by hears and saying, but not directly, we know how his life is at risk in helping the truth. He will speak us in particular of his inquiry about the migrants where slowing down the frequency of the barges has achieved a substantial compensation while big smuggling of oil were carried out. This comes out from his pages. But we also know that in these days he keeps our eyes and our hearts open on what happened in the cold Bosnia in Croatia, and I asked him to tell, first of all, where he is speaking us from in this moment, and thank you for all what you are doing to give truth and a bit of warmth to these refugees. Thank you of being here. Thank you for this solemn and huge introduction. I say hello to all friends and all people. I've been lucky to meet you and to see again, even only remotely. I'm very happy for this meeting because when Cecilia told me and we wrote each other, I thought that these items, this theme in particular, about the use of some resources, at the end always the same, in some areas of the world are the same. And it, they are important to understand what happens around a big theme which Riccardo Cristiano has been evoking, the great challenge of our time, which is the human rights. Human rights that, in the light of Pope Francis' teaching, we cannot interpret through integral human development, which sees elaborated declinations, sometimes try to reduce it to ecological and environmental battles, but it's always useful, as Ricardo said, to keep together the geography of places, of culture, which is not only a geography of the heart of politics, but also, I'd say, a perspective geography. Because to understand, as Ricardo has explained, before that the Iraqi dynamic in the dial is a dynamic which of all out in the Mediterranean and means understanding that we are playing with the future of mankind in the next centuries. What happened in Libya, not only Libya, but certainly in Libya, has happened in a plastic manner, really has been under-evaluated by the public opinions. We started dealing with the landing of migrants, the departures, the smugglers, and working on these dynamics, we probably touched some big wires of other interests. This way, it arose a really complex dynamic, which I'll try to summarize, which sees in the petroleum, in general, the management of the energy sources, but in a broader sense of the mineral layers in that dial, a bet. A bet in this moment we are winning if we want to use a term of Casino and not of experts or scholars of international politics. And I refer in particular to Russia and Turkey that coincidentally have a lot to do with the Pope's trip in the next days. In Libya, it happened what? It happened that this criminal fellowship around the dissolution of the fundamental human rights allowed to let it sit at the same table people who probably 20 years ago would refuse only to have a coffee together. And at the same table, there were seated the representative of international institutions, heads of the Libyan mafia, uh, of Libyan militias, heads of tribal organizations and municipalities. So a microcosm which actually manages and controls directly the big sources of that country. I'll try to make an example, and it came from a journalistic investigation, and that it has been confirmed by the Drug Office of the European Commission, so an official organism. We had identified about 40 ships, 42 exactly, engaged in oil smuggling from Libya to Europe. Working on this traffic, we had intersected word that the main state oil center in Libya, active at the moment, called Azawiya Refinery Company, and it is writing Azawiya, was controlled and protected by, by the oil police, the Petroleum Guard, which is a branch of a Libyan militia of a Cosca, to speak in terms of Cosa Nostra of Sicily, called Al Nasser. This protection service was offered, or better imposed, to an Italian multinational which had in concession the exploitation of this layer, this refinery. So from this port, curiously, every day a certain number of ships used to leave, real tankers, some big fishing motors transformed in ships for the transportation, reached Europe. And how? They arrived in Malta. Here we have crossed the stories and verified that the figures involved are directly involved with the homicide of the journalist Luana Galizia, and in Malta the importation miraculously from illegal of petroleum stolen from the militia which had to protect the oil plant was stolen, was put in these ships for the transportation. Who was responsible of the port was also the commander of the local coast guard involved in the international trafficking and migrants, wanted from these accusations by United Nations, recently arrested after years and years. And then it happened that in Malta, this petroleum suddenly, with a piece of paper and a stamp, used to become a legal action. Since that moment, oil, Malta is in Schengen area, oil could circle freely and legally in Europe. Only in Italy, the damage for the state cashers of tax not paid for the smuggling are about 10 billion euros per year. But this oil, what happened? Why did it come to this? Moreover, these hydrocarbons today are Europe through the fuel distributors, the so-called no logo, where one thinks of having the opportunity to save, but instead it financed the militias. About this, if you allow me to make a joke, until 2017, Italy Navy charged of fighting the international oil smuggling stocked up in Sicily in an oil plant which used to get oil from smuggling from Libya. So it contrasted the smuggling, not knowing, of course, using the oil from smuggling. This is the system which has involved the big Italian mafia, the international mafia. But why did we come to this? Here we come to the accusation I was referring before of the Drug Office of the EU, an accusation made and journalists thought to be mad. But the accusation was, you have eliminated from the Mediterranean the military ship, not because I will become a militarist, but this is the accusation. Have you, a European government, taken off the military ship in the Mediterranean? Because the military ships were forced to succor human beings. And since it has to pursue the politics of the closed ports, the institutional aid has been taken off from the sea. This encouraged mafias, which took advantage of this open channel and involved in particular the Sicilian mafia, the Calabrian mafia, a mafia group from the Balkans, a group which through the Libyan militias let come not only oil, but now in the last year also big quantities of drug from Central America. So we understand that having to sacrifice human rights in some way because we don't have to welcome, we don't have to aid because the others come to invade us, it has been knowingly allowed, the accusation moved in these years, increased and reiterated by the official organisms, it's been decided consciously instead to give the spaces to the organized crime. Today it's stronger. It's stronger because today it has an international showing because once it was weaker, today is stronger due to the logistic offered by the Libyan militias. It's clear again how all this mechanism, a perverse mechanism which sacrifices human rights, sacrifices the sources the nature gives us, and does not build justice, stability, and safety, because also the safety builder are forced to stop. Unfortunately, I fear we will have to reckon for a very long time for this reality because inquiries and investigation will resume against the humanitarian organization aiding at the sea. Because once they were aided, but we have demonstrated them with a journalist on board, they could see and listen to and record documents, presences, carrying ons, which have gave troubles to whom prefers it has not to be seen. So what a man's life is worth in those parts of the world, probably much less of a barrel of oil. This is the reality we have to face, and I close controversially. It has happened. Of course, I would say this is not a disease related to a political party in particular, because in Italy we started with a government not of right wing, and we went on with the other governments. There will be soon other investigations. I'm waiting for them from the Humanitarian Association because we have to safeguard other interests. Pope Francis told us when speaking about the Third World War fight in pieces, and people like me, educated in the school of Riccardo Cristiano, understood that these pieces are not pieces of territory, but pieces of interest which in various parts of the world crossing, and our task is to keep the eyes open and see that the problem is not exclusively what happens in Syria or Iraq or Libya, but what happens in the back shops of the politics of the international strong powers that go out of their way to constant the Pope.
Sappiamo anche, insomma,
Thank,
quanto rischioso sia tutto quello che
thank
sta
you so much. Everything is connected, also in bad things. And we know also how all this is risky and all you do. And we thank you so much. Now I ask Elena to introduce the bishop with a brief video. We are squeezing out the planet's goods, squeezing them out as if the earth were an orange. Countries and businesses from the global north have enriched themselves by exploiting the natural resources of the south, creating an ecological debt. Who is going to pay this debt? In addition, this ecological debt is increased when multinationals do abroad what they would never be allowed to do in their own countries. It's scandalous. Today, not tomorrow. Today, we have to take care of creation responsibly. Let us pray for the planet's resources will not be plundered, but shared in a just and respectful manner. No to plundering, yes to sharing.
Siamo onorati
We are honored to have with us His Excellency the Bishop Youssef Antoine Swift. Sorry for my pronunciation. Pope Francis, November of last year, um, took him off Cyprus, where last year, together with the director of the National Office of Social and Working Items of CEI, Don Bruno Bignami, we were guests because um, brought in a country with big difficulties in Lebanon, the Archbishop of Tripoli in Lebanon, his, uh, His Excellency welcomed us in Cyprus. He opened our eyes on different realities. And if you were with me, you could see with what a texture his group of volunteers of the commission and his dialogue. But Cyprus found itself also inside strong tensions in the Mediterranean for the possession of the energy resources. We know about the crisis in Turkey and Greece. To His Excellency, we ask to help us to understand and also help us to have this vision of the Mediterranean as also the other have anticipated as a specific place of meeting of people of different cultures and different religions and his expectations. Thank you, His Excellency, of being here with us. Thank you, Cecilia. Uh, Good evening, everybody. For me, it's a honor to share with you this reflection in the land path towards the port of Easter and resurrection. I'm very glad of being a voice of testimony in this occasion. Very, very deep, very strategic. It's true. It's true. This Mediterranean, which tends to go towards a tension, a conflict already existing since many years. And in its history, in its message, in its mission of origin, was and should be a pacific thing between people that is faces, people meeting cultures and religions. These are not headings, not theories. These words are a reality. And today I'm not giving you an academic essay, but a testimony of something lived, uh, starting from the presence and bearing testimony to arrive to our mission as baptized people, as good will people. We are signs of hope. So presence, testimony, and and hope. First of all, let's a Francis in this historic clip. We have horror in the historic moment in the history of the Mediterranean and the Middle East in general. But uh, I would also like with you feeling close to those people suffering from this COVID, really a very serious tragedy. And we hope for the grace of the healing for all people and also for these consequences of this COVID and also for this area which is suffering a lot. I start from an experience, as you said before, Cecilia, 12 years as bishop in Cyprus, and I started from my hometown in Tripoli, in Lebanon, my mission in my area. So I see there in the daily life not one opportunity but different of opportunities of meeting which are lived on a daily basis. In Cyprus, we have an excellent experience of the so-called art and religious art that is Christians leaders of the Christian communities together with the mosque for 9, 10, 11 years. We have worked together. And so now, and this in the context of the problem of Cyprus was a sign of hope and opportunity of meeting among religions, people of different cultures. Religions can meet, can work together for the common good, for the good of the human being, the values of the human being, for the human rights, the religious freedom. That's what we do. Uh, Even the context, the social political was not in favor sometimes according to the agenda of the period, the political agenda of the period. Then another excellent experience in Cyprus, which is going on now, is the so-called bi-community technical cultural competence. That is, both the community in Cyprus, the Greek one and the Turkish one, have been working and work together to safeguard this, this cultural heritage, not only to preserve buildings, but to create a meeting space among people. In Lebanon, my experience is very long because I'm from Lebanon. I go back there, and some days ago Only some days ago, facing serious problems in my diocese, where for 1 week we have been living terrible nights. I was present. So at 300 meters from the bishop's seat, we made a call to Christians with the mosque of the city, with civil society, to calm down this tendency toward an internal conflict, an, uh, an almost serious conflict, which probably something of serious come from inside Tripoli and after in Lebanon, because unfortunately we live in a very serious tension, and let's say at a national level, at economic level, a monetary collapse, a totally mess in social and political sphere, and so we needed a prophetic word, something different. Where do we go? It's impossible to go today. Go Maronite came with the president of the Assembly of the Patriarchs and Catholic bishops to send a call to the national conscience, the international conscience, that Lebanon should maintain its identity. Identity of what? Identity of a meeting of between religions, among cultures, different families, the civil society, in the freedom of the thinking and religious expressions. And so all these line, all this prophetic voice has to be helped, supported, developed in a context, as we have heard so far, at economic level and strategical level, also at the level of this oil that now is the focus point, not only for the area but of the whole world, which is looking for a bigger market where to put the hand of the great for the great potentials. So that's a reality, but this is not the whole reality. Reality, the daily reality, is the reality of people. If we consider if it exists in our that these are enemies. They are not enemies. They are orientations an enmity to the world, but in the daily reality. For example, I speak now through names and headlines. We speak about Sunni Shia conflict. This is very political, very big, but in one city where family exists, daily life is not totally like this. It's true that the ideologies feed, but there is awakening from this religious tension existing, and from this item of populism which exists in the Mediterranean, in Middle East, and goes towards to the West to create xenophobia, that is the fear of the other, but it's not the whole reality. They are ideologies, again, um, feed, rooted in this area. Unfortunately, also at a methodological level and pedagogical level, to destroy this simpleness, this humanity of people desiring to live together, and they can succeed in living together. But all this, unfortunately, is linked to the interest in gas, oil, economic powers, to put a hand on these resources that, sorry, you told me to make a sign. So, so the area risks to enter in the war. It's already entered since years, that there is a solution. The solution exists. I don't give a solution, but an attempt, a message of a possibility of being able to live together. And this is mm, that's very important at a level of education. To educate, I like Laudato Si. I like this Laudato Si. This mentality, this freedom, this education. We have different texts, different experiences. Fratelli Tutti, this document of Abu Dhabi is an education to dialogue, and it is an education in looking for the other, the different. It's an education to peace. It's also an education, and we have said a lot and analyzed in the Synod for the Middle East to the citizenship, to the citizenship will help a lot of citizens of different religions, of different cultures, to feel being citizens of a unique country with their own right, who to live in their dignity, who can enjoy the goods of their countries. All this is, is a sort of education, but all this probably is oriented by by people, by population, to be able to change. And here I will be very clear, to change a political sphere, a political category, unfortunately, so far hasn't wanted to change the situation, because this situation, this category of 5-10% of a country, in this case, will remain. People rule all these people, and they take off the duty and the real royalty of people who want to live together. People who will succeed in living together. And these are not utopias, they are daily experiences. And we see them. I think our role, our virtue in, is in this sense cooperating with the religious institutions, with other religions, but also with civil institutions. So religious institution and civil and political one to develop this education of democracy, of freedom, of citizenship, and also the area needs a critical thinking. That's what's missing in the Middle East society, the critical thinking to choose the real politicians, the real CEOs, senior executives of society. This is a process. It's not easy. Probably at a long term, that the decision has to be taken because I'd say people now is ready to make this journey because people have been suffering for decades for a negligence, um, a sort uh, of being left apart. People think that this happens at a global level, and now they are ready for a change. Church is here to take initiatives for this change for the good of the person. Thank, thank you so much. Bishop was also appointed advisor of the Dicastery of the Integral Human Development. This is a wonderful news because we cooperate a lot with the Dicastery. So far, so for us, um, but it really what you said is it's totally worth for us, and listening to a bishop calling us back to the political dimension of our commitment linked to the education one at the beginning of the Eastern Way. Let us enter these interconnected dimensions of Laudato Si and its revolution. So thank you so much, Excellency. And now I'm very happy to give the floor to Don Sandro De Angelis. Don Sandro, we went to search for him in the depths of Cambodia in Uganda. And with Elena, we had already recorded him because we didn't know about the connections, and we didn't absolutely want to lose him. But now he's here with us. He's a fide donum of the Diocese of Urbino. The good news he gives to us animators here, a bit old of age, even a lot of young people are here, and there always be. At 66 years old, he has left to Uganda, leaving Marke. So there is hope for all of us. The Lord renews my youth every moment. Don Sandro is a testimony of what is happening in Uganda with the East Africa crude oil pipeline, the ECOP, with a great risk of social environmental impact. So let's feel the love of a witness and a pastor. Thank you, Don Sandro, for being here with us. Thank you, Cecilia. Thank you. I, above all, say hello with a brotherly sense of friendship, all guests and all people present at this panel discussion. I'd like to start my contribution with the words of Pope Francis. Here you often speak about the Pope, and I'm happy for this. In the audience of the Wednesday, 16th of September 2020, he spoke about the care of the common home and the care for creation. And the Pope said, we must also extend this care to our common home, to the earth and to every creature. All forms of life are interconnected, and our health depends on that of ecosystems that God created and entrusted to us to care for. Abusing them, on the other hand, is a grave sin that damages, harms, and sickens. These words of the Pope uh, drive mm, our worry in this moment here in Uganda for the green light given to big oil project which wants to build an oil pipeline 1,400 kilometers long between Uganda and Tanzania until the port of Tanga in the Indian Ocean. And the destination of this crude oil is for Asia, in particular China. The oil field identified in the coasts of the Lake Albert and in the big Murchison Falls National Park. The oil companies, as usually, claim to have taken into consideration and solved the environmental and social plants and pipeline could cause to the communities. I I think I've asked for possible of social insurances. Um, Despite these assurances, we have valid reasons to have lots of doubts to denounce serious problems. These are the risks of the pipeline, and problems of production are huge. Consultations with the communities have been, let's say it clearly, they have been only formalities. I, I mention only some of these problems that will come out after this project. Of all, first of all, what I want to say is also for other areas of Uganda, the pipeline will across are are very important for the life of animals, chimpanzees, hippos, crocodiles, elephants, giraffes, lions, antelopes, and so on. And we ask ourselves what it will be of these animals after the works of this oil. Surely it's higher the money the government will get, also the Uganda government from the oil, than the money got from the visitors of the national park. But this can't be. Money can't be a good reason to devastate the environment and a wonderful park that the searching for. Then a second problem. This pipeline uh, passes through critical habitats for the survival of the species of animals, but also 12 forest reserves. This project puts certainly at risk on the east coast of the Lake Albert the future of the Bugova forest, an area of 400 square kilometers, which is protected for 90 years by this population, which hosts a population of chimpanzees. The forest risks to be surrounded by this pipeline, the streets, and even an airport. Then very big, it will be the wound produced due to the pipelines, which will be underground and require that it will be kept a passage of 30 meters with no buildings, trees, and crops. The two-thirds of the oil pipeline pass on agricultural lands in Uganda and also in different villages in these districts where they have lost their lands to give space to infrastructures linked to the project. A lot of people have been moved away from their houses and put in houses made of concrete in a village built expressly for them. But these people complain because they live in confined space and because they have to do long walking routes to reach their camps lands because they do not have enough space for their cattle. Of course, for them, it is an uprooting of their culture, of their habits. Then, besides disrupting of the habitats and of the wild fauna and agriculture, the project brings another big threat, the pollution surely comes out that will come out from the oil rigs. In fact, for one-third of the way, the pipeline goes through the drainage basin of the big Lake Victoria, the biggest African lake and one of the sources of the Nile, and runs along the coast for 33 kilometers. So it is a worry also the fact that the pipeline will have to cross 130 rivers and the pipes seems to have to be laid down in a depth on the bed of the streams. We add to this that the pipeline crosses a hilly and seismic region. So the danger of losses is grown also due to the risk of earthquakes. Recently, in 2016, An earthquake of magnitude 5.6 in this area has killed 20 people and destroyed at least 900 buildings. What it will be of the oil pipeline? So this intervention generates lots of perplexities for the sure threats to the landscape, to biodiversity, to the ecosystem, and it won't surely be a source of profit for people. If the profits of the oil extracted reach really the local population, it would, however, be a source for poverty. As usual, the possible wealth will be again shared among the powerful, and these people accustomed to work the land will have a subtraction of arable land and not spaces where to lead their own animals. So it will surely continue the ranks of the poor and of the unemployed. This contribution of mine, I would also like to remember living here in Cambodia. I would recall some reflections of the bishop of the Diocese of Moroto, Monsignor Damiano Guzzetti, Italian, on the environmental degradation region of Uganda, the Karamoja. I say a region forgotten by everyone. Sometimes say also forgotten by God, but of course doesn't forget it. But it seems that nobody takes it into consideration. The Bishop of Moroto says we start also here in this region to have oil problems. Oil has been found also in Karamoja, and it has started the boarding, the hoarding of the lands. These this gives a lot of worry because besides the exploitation of the land, there is no respect for people, no respect for the culture, no respect for these people. And minerals, the of the minerals. Since a few years, they have been found in Karamoja precious mineral, above all gold and fine marble, and also for this situation, a lot of companies already taken often, often illegally, the rights of extraction on a huge area of the land. And this could really be a great disaster for this population in Karamoja, which live mainly of animal breeding and that needs wide spaces that the oil companies have just started to occupy. And then linked to this fact of the minerals discovering